Hi, 6th graders. We are still on Unit 4, Fractions Unit. Multiplying fractions is our lesson for this video. I'm going to try to keep this one short to make up for the long video that you had to watch for the adding and subtracting mixed numbers from the other day. So, numerator, we know, is the top number in the fraction. That represents the part. Denominator is the bottom number, and that represents the whole. 2/3 means that you have 2 parts out of 3 wholes. Improper fraction, top number is bigger than the bottom number, and then a mixed number, remember, is a whole number with a fraction. Any of these that you do not remember or that you forget, make sure you take time to write them down. Multiplying fractions and mixed numbers. These would be fabulous steps to pause and write down in your notebook. First of all, we need to change mixed numbers to improper fractions. We need to, if we have a whole number, we need to put a 1 under it to make it a fraction. Multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and then, as always, put it in simplest form. Notice that it does not say we need a common denominator because we don't when we multiply fractions. So let's look at this. If we're multiplying 1/2 times 1/3, basically what this means is we are taking 1/3 of a half. So we can see this rectangle, and this is 1/2. And if we take the 1/2 and then we divide it, as you can see, into 3 parts, 1/3 of 1/2 is this part right here, which ends up being 1/6 of the whole rectangle. Also, we can do, we take our numerators and we multiply them. So 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 3 is 6. It's in simplest form, so that is that. If we have a whole number, we need to make the whole number a fraction, so we do 2/1. And if we look over here, we have 2 rectangles. They're both broken into fourths because we're taking 3/4 of 2. So 3/4 of 1 would just be 3/4. 3/4 of another one would be 3/4. So 3/4 of both of them would basically be 6/4 because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then totaled together we have 1/2. So 2/1 times 3/4, let's rewrite it. So that we always want to put a 1 for our whole numbers so that our numerators line up and our denominators line up. 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 4 is 4. 4 goes into 6 once with 2 left over. Keep the denominator, and then we have 1/2. You try some on your own and then come back and check. So 3/5 times 1/2. 3 times 1 is 3. 5 times 2 is 10. And we have 3/10. 1/3 times 3/4. 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 4 is 12. I know they can both be divided by 3, so we have 1/4. 2/3 times 4/1. The very first thing is I just make my whole number over 1. Let's rewrite it so it lines up. 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 goes into 8 twice, which would be 6. So I have 2 left over, 2 2/3. Okay, if we have a mixed number, the very first thing is we have to make it into an improper fraction. The only way to multiply mixed numbers is they have to be an improper fraction. We cannot just go 1/2 times 2/5 and then add that 4. Nope, they all have to be a fraction. So we're going to rewrite it. 1/2 times, and then 5 times 4 is 20 plus 2. So 22/5. 1 times 22 is 22/10. And now I rewrite it as a mixed number. 10 goes into 22 2 times with 2 left over, and my denominator stays the same, which is also 2 1/5. You try some or watch me do another one, and then you could try the last couple. So I'm going to rewrite it. 1/4 times 9 times 8 is 72 plus 4. So 72 plus 4 is 76/9. 1 times 76 is 76. 4 times 9 is 36. 36 goes into 76 twice because I know 36 times 2 is 72. So 2 and 4, 36. They can both be divided by 4. So 2 and 1/9. 5 and 1/3 times 3. So 3 times 5 is 15 plus 1. So 16/3 times 3 over 1. So 16 times 3. I know that 15 times 3 is 45. So 16 times 3 would be 48. So I would just add another 3. So 48/3. I know that 15 or so we just said 16 times 3 is 48. So 48 divided by 3 is 16. We can look at this a different way. I'm going to rewrite this right up here. So 16/3 times 3 over 1. If I look at my diagonal numbers, so it's basically like our cross products, I can see that 3 and 3 can both be simplified, meaning they can both be divided by the same number, which is 3. So if I divide them both by 3, I would get 3 divided by 3 is 1. So my new number would be 16 over 1 times 1 over 1. So that's how I get 16. That might be confusing to you. The more you see it, the more it will make sense. So I'll do it on the next one if it works out. And I'll do it a little bit more in class as well. But this is called cross canceling. And it helps when you have bigger numbers for numerators and denominators. So 1 and 7/8, we need to do 8 times 1 plus 7. So 8 times 1 is 8 plus 7. So I have 15/8. And then 5 times 2 is 10 plus 2 is 12/5. And I can do cross canceling. So I can just do 15 times 12 and 8 times 5, and I would get a pretty high number. But let's do that first. So 15 times 12, I'm just going to do it up here. 2 times 5 is 10. Add my 1, so 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 would be 3. And then 0, 1 times 5, 1 times 1, so 180 over 40. And again, I know that 40 can go into 180, so I can count by 40s. 40, 80, 120, 160, or 4 times 4 is 16. So I know that it can go into it 4 times, which is 160, with 20 left over. 20 40ths is 1/2, so I'd have 4.5. Let's look down here one more time. 15/8 times 12/5. I know that 8 and 12 can both be divided by 4. So that's going to change to a 2, and that's going to change to a 3. And then I know 15 and 5, notice I'm only looking at my diagonals, can both be divided by 5. So that's going to change to a 3, and that's going to change to a 1. So I'm going to rewrite this before I try to do this in my head. 3/2 times 3 over 1 is 9/2, which would be then 4.5. Okay, if this cross canceling is confusing to you, then stick with the one with the larger numbers and keep going that way until I explain it a little bit better. We have a real world example. So if humans sleep about 1/3 of each day and each year is equal to 365 1/4 days, determine the number of days in a year the average human sleeps. So if humans sleep about 1/3 of 365 1/4 days, the of stands for multiplication. And then if you look here, this is showing you, because we have a really large number right here, this is showing you how you can use cross cancellation to make a smaller number. So see how we cross canceled it here to get a smaller number, and then it ends up going there. So if you want to pause and see an example of it, feel free, and you can look closer at what they're doing. And then last one, Sophia wishes to make half of a recipe. If the original recipe calls for 3 3/4 cups of flour, how many cups should she use? So 3 3/4 times 1/2. So 3 3/4 can be written as 4 times 3 is 12 plus 3. So 15/4 times 1/2. 15 and 2, there's nothing that 15 and 2 can both be divided by. And then 4 and 1, so if I'm looking at my diagonals, that's already can't be divided by anything else either. So now I just leave it. 15 times 1 is 15. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 goes into 15 once with 7 left over. So 1 7/8 cups of flour, which is half of 3 3/4, and that makes sense. All right, that is all I have for you. Hopefully it's a lot shorter than the one from last night. Have a great night.